Welcome to episode 4 of the Animus podcast, a weekly podcast focusing on everything Assassin's Creed community news and discussion. I'm one of your hosts, Aftermath1231, and with me today, as usual, is Aries.
Hello, friends.
And McCracKenway.
Coming to you live. No, pre-recorded. Whatever. Go on.
And our guest this week is Lwsrocks.
Hey, everybody.
Who we'll be referring to as Lawson throughout the recording. Today, we'll be discussing Lawson's time on the subreddit, his 65 days, 65 sequences marathon, and some of his music that he has graciously allowed us to use throughout our podcasts here. Then we'll be moving on to Assassin's Creed Chronicles China, India, and Russia reveal.
Hold it.
And then we'll be discussing George Washington. So let's get started. So Lawson, great to have you here.
Super excited to be here, yeah.
Yeah, it's great.
We're very
It's
prestigious.
really great to have someone who's making music on the podcast too. So do you want to tell us a little bit about when you first came on the subreddit?
Yeah, I was pretty late compared to most of you guys. I joined probably a couple months after I played AC4, which was probably only a month or so after it came out. I got into this series really late. Like, I remember when AC3 came out and I was like 12 and I was like, oh yeah, that looks so cool. But I didn't want to go through a backlog of like 5 games to get there. I had some like break in school for some reason and went through all of them and I was like, this is awesome. And after AC4 came out, I was like really excited to like speculate and theorize on what the next game would be. So it was pretty fitting that I showed up right during all of the fake leaks, which were wonderful. You know, the dude talking about the Best Buy guy. What's that?
Oh, Best Buy guy.
Best Buy guy.
Yeah. Yeah, Connor
Yeah.
in Revolutionary France.
Connor in the French Revolution. He was half right, but
Yeah, we
still
were half
nasty.
right.
He was half
No,
right.
he wasn't right at all. He was talking about he had posters and stuff.
Yeah, I've got
I
a bunch of
actually
posters that won't let me
believed-
open them.
Yeah,
I believed the Great Fall leak when that
Yeah.
came about.
that was
I
a very
fell
well done
for
leak.
just about everything that showed up. I was like, guys, Assassin's Creed Desert Sun, it's happening. I was not nearly as skeptical as I was supposed to be.
Everyone
We've
needs to
really
be
missed
yeah.
that a lot
tasty chili.
this year, given that it's like 2 weeks
Mhm.
after
Yeah.
Unity comes out. Hey, guys, victory is a thing now. Have fun with that. Well, there goes the speculation.
That was, I mean, like, and
Yeah.
that was even kind of like, I mean, most years it's been, you get the leak and everybody's like, oh my god, this is awesome, Assassin's Creed Ancient Egypt, woohoo, Phoenixes, China. This year was like, we got a leak, we got it confirmed, and people were actually like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Aw,
Ubisoft.
man. And Dead Kings was totally teasing Egypt. Like, I can just see them behind the scenes wanting to fuck with us. They're just like, you
I
know what,
agree.
let's drop all these mad hints about Egypt, and the next game will have nothing to do with
I
Egypt.
wouldn't say literally
Kings-
mentioning Egypt was a mad hint, though. I'd say that's mentioning Egypt.
Oh, but
It-
you know, Freedom Cry was set in a French colony, and Darby considered that grounds
Yeah.
as a hint towards France. You know, mentioning it is exactly what they think of as a mad hint.
Actually, I
Right,
think
yeah.
the hint in Rogue was, hey, there's this huge Arctic expedition where we can find this cool thing. I think that's what the hint was.
Or-
It was for
No,
Rogue,
they
not
weren't
Unity.
they hinting at... Actually, that's something that's very interesting. We don't know if they're hinting at Rogue or Unity.
That's true.
Yeah.
I believe...
Damn you, Darby!
We'll see.
Yeah.
There's,
I believe the community came
there's-
to a consensus that they were meaning a French colony, which annoys me.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't just mentioning Egypt either. They were sending a piece of Eden to Egypt, and plus there was that, like, half-baked speculation that the assassin on the carriage was a sage or some bullshit.
Oh, that was just...
Like,
yeah.
there was some credible evidence we'd see Egypt.
I mean,
And if AC Rogue was the main series, I'd have been like, Vikings confirmed, everyone.
If it had stopped with Unity, then it would just be like, it would be like Lafayette inviting Connor to France, because they mention it a few
Yeah.
times, and it's basically like that's what Napoleon does. He's like invites Arno to do stuff, but
In London
especially
or
with
something?
Oh, yeah.
well, he invites Arno to like be a major general or whatever.
Yeah, he mentions him to come on, and he could be a high ranking within.
Yeah. And then Unity, I feel like Unity hinted a lot at because they kind of promised like Napoleon and Arno have a great, interesting friendship, and then you don't see as much of it in Unity. And
I
feel
liked
like
Napoleon. What we saw of him, I enjoyed. He wasn't there a whole lot, but I think Napoleon was a good example of how AC2 uses historical characters, which is something we may touch upon later in the episode, of course.
I loved Napoleon so much.
his
So much.
stories
You've probably
were
heard
fun.
me talk about him a lot.
That hood's a
Dead
bit
Kings
sinister.
ruined him. Dead Kings destroyed his character. It made no sense. They were best friends.
I wouldn't say it ruined him, but it was pretty poor.
I feel like Dead Kings and Unity set up. I mean, they tease. I don't think we're going to get anything out of it, but it teases going to Egypt and fleshing out that relationship with Napoleon, because I don't feel like it was ever properly explained why he was in Saint Denis in the first place. So it feels like more to this. I mean, he was there for the spoilers, the POE, but like he goes after it in Egypt, and I feel like there'd be more explanation like why he's doing this particularly.
And you guys know what my theory is personally, that I think they're going to go the Call of Duty route. I've said this probably a billion times, and that while 2 other studios work on titles for 2016 and 2017, like Montreal will be making some form of Arno-related or Egypt-related direct sequel to Unity of some sort. But to get things
that makes sense.
Back on track, since we were just talking about my time on the subreddit.
Lawson, one of the things you're probably most known for on the subreddit is actually your 65-day, 65 sequences marathon from last year. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit? Explain what it is.
Yeah, it was kind of funny how that happened. I was literally... The day before I started it, I was just going through, and I just decided to play through the older games in lead up to Unity myself. It wasn't nearly as structured as the marathon ended up being, but I was just playing through Brotherhood, and I was just like, I wonder, how many days are there until Unity launches? And then I Googled it, and then I was like, wait, how many sequences are there? Because the idea was starting to form, and it just so happened that the next day it would line up perfectly between how many sequences there are and how many days there are until Unity launches. It was just the exact number. Not exact, because I later I made some sort of error in my calculation. You might remember towards the end of the marathon, it changed from the 65-day marathon to the 67-day marathon just out of nowhere, because I miscounted the number of sequences in AC1. But yeah, it was. I'm proud of the idea. I think it was a good, fun thing to do, and I think a lot of people, there were at least 12 people or so who stuck through the whole thing and played every day, but there was definitely a lot more interest in the beginning than there was at the end. It sort of waned off.
Do you plan on doing something similar this year, and have you checked how many sequences Rogue and Unity added on?
Yeah, it's going to be the 84. 84 days, 84 sequences. That's what's going to happen this year.
Damn.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. And that is, a lot of people were asking me to do this. A lot of people said, hey, while you're at it, throw in Liberation and Freedom Cry.
Oh, man.
Dead King. Remember. Why not? And I was going to, but there were a lot of complicated, like Freedom Cry, they're not a series of sequences. It's just one whole thing, one whole set of missions.
Freedom Cry is a big commitment.
Dividing them up into days was going to be a divisive and challenging task in its own. And Liberations, I'm probably with the majority opinion on this, but it's not that good.
I was pleasantly surprised knowing that it was like a handheld, but it's not like as good as AC3 in my opinion, and I liked AC3.
What it does do is it shows how much Ubisoft Sofia improved between that and making Rogue.
Oh yeah,
it's a good.
They probably had a high budget.
I just don't know if I want to play it. That's the thing. I tried. I never finished it. I started it. I got to that part with, I think Mackendall was his name, and then I was just like, this is kind of shit. I don't really care. I mean, Aveline's wonderful and all, and the Persona system is slightly intriguing, but everything else is pretty much balls. So
I really liked going into open combat as like the fully dressed noblewoman killing people. That felt awesome.
The combat, that is AC Liberation is a low point for the combat in the series, because it was just about the easiest thing to just slice and dice your way through everyone. People complained about that in AC3, but Liberation should get a lot more shit for that than it actually does.
And
but yeah,
your marathon this year is actually just going to blast straight through Chronicles releases, which Should be interesting.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes. I didn't even think of that until you mentioned it just now. Obviously, we can't include them in the lineup because we have no idea how those are going to be released, particularly India and Russia. Or maybe we will once it comes actually time. Because, I mean, this is pretty late in the year that this is going to start happening.
Russia, I believe, is like within like a month before victory, probably.
Damn.
Yeah.
Because they said that it's basically in the fall.
Yeah, I'm basically just going to once a release date is firmly announced for victory is when I'll say,
Yes.
"Hey guys,
This
the
is
marathon's going to happen this day." But I do have a lot of pretty neat plans depending on how much I can manage on my own and how much help I can get from other people. I want to take each game and divide up the side missions so that every day there's a list of recommended side missions.
Cool.
I want it to be set up
Nice.
so that if you want to, you can 100% the game while you play
Yeah.
through the marathon.
Damn.
Oh man, I think the hardest for that would be Unity, just because the side missions and the co-op
seriously.
missions take place all over the timeline, but you have access to all of them at the same time.
Yeah.
Probably not for Unity because there's just so many collectibles and side missions that it's just
Don't
daunting.
bother with the collectibles. The side missions are pretty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of there's more side missions in Unity than in any of the other ones, I'd say.
That's true.
But about the victory release date, I'm going to do one of Aries' bold predictions and say it's probably going to be
my God.
the Tuesday closest to Halloween. Because since AC3, Ubisoft has been hammering on that, like October 31st, October 30th, 29th. So if they don't delay it, that's when it's probably going to be.
Yeah,
But-
Is this why
I'm just
they
not
call you
going to
the
announce
Oracle on
anything
Watch Dogs Simulator?
until the dates are firm. I want to do some. I want there was like a couple of live streamers for it last time,
Oh yeah.
and I'd like it to be more organized and have an actual like official live stream of the marathon that's a little more professional than just this one kid who's getting on whenever he feels like it and doing his live stream
Yeah.
for a couple of people. No offense to those who did live stream, because I really did enjoy when someone did try to do that. I just would like it to be a little more like official this time.
Yeah. Well, you should. I'm reading here. I actually didn't realize this, but on your original post that you're saying that you couldn't actually get any mod support for it.
Well, I didn't really try.
Okay.
I never
That's fine.
thought about reaching out to the mods or anything. I was just like, hey, if they like the idea and they want to make it. Because I actually did reach out to you, Aftermath, at one point and say, hey, it might be cool if we sticky these threads, guys. And you were like, we can only sticky one thread at a time, and we're
Well, I
doing the
wasn't
weekly
mod at the
discussion questions, so forget it.
I became a mod in February.
Then it wasn't you, then
I
it
think
was someone
Fred.
else.
It was Fred, actually.
Freddie?
I think.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm making
someone.
it up. Maybe Fred's going to yell at me right in a minute here.
We're cancelled, guys.
But yeah, if you want any help, we're always here. And the mods will be helping out all the way this time. We'll stick it each day. And
Although I think we have talked on some of the early podcast meetings about wanting to incorporate that into some of the shows when we start getting around that period where we're doing this marathon.
Yeah, and maybe
each new game will have you on to talk or something like that.
that'd be a really
Yeah.
cool. That'd be awesome.
To do
I'd
retrospective.
enjoy that.
Just have a guest
And-
host for a little bit.
Yeah, and it might be interesting to compare and contrast now that we have one whole marathon under our belt, and once we get responses like, because the whole point is that we're discussing the levels as we do them, and that we're having conversations about, character interactions and what was good or not good about the gameplay, and it might be interesting to see if there's a difference in response to games this year compared to last year, perhaps. So I want to go pretty in-depth with I want to say analytical stuff and just sort of see how things have changed between the 2 years.
Yeah.
I'll be right
And
there
stuff
for
like
you.
that.
Oh, yeah.
Funny thing was,
Aries can handle the story. I can handle the gameplay. I've done some of
back,
that.
I'm,
guys.
I'm all
I
about
got
the
this.
story stuff. Aries and I we'll have
Look at
some
this.
fun
You
with
already
the
have
story analysis.
like 4 people lined up to help you out on this week.
Yeah.
Have you been in contact with the other guy who was helping you out?
Treviso, barely. We had a bit of conversation after the end of the marathon last year and he just said, hey, if you want me back next year, if you need my help again, he's there. So that'll be awesome. And I'll definitely make use of his services. Wow, that sounded kind of prostituted, didn't it?
Only if you pay him.
No. Dancers. That's what they're calling
Dancers, yes.
Typical
They're
Assassin's
dancers
Creed
now.
fashion.
They're not
20
courtesans.
All right.
And one thing I did want to mention about the marathon was at the end of the marathon, I posted a poll, right? I wanted to gauge what people's reactions were. It was pretty in depth. It was like, what did you guys like, dislike, feel indifferent to? And, important questions like, do you want Liberation to be part of the lineup next year? Do you want this stuff to be there? And no one responded.
Well, actually, I, for example, and many others that I know of were actually in exile, or we called it exile. We would look at the subreddit things in preparation so there were no spoilers. So maybe if you do that at the start of this year's one.
That's what I'll do. I'm going to just re-upload the same forum, just see what people are interested in.
Yeah, that'll work.
There's nothing would change about it. But yeah, it'll be...
I would upload that form when we start getting hype for Victory, because that's when I think when the most people will be on the sub.
Yeah. Once the announcement date. That's all I'm waiting for is for them to say, here's when the game is coming out. Because you can't do anything else with the marathon until you know that.
Yeah.
Because you got to know what the days are leading up to. So once that comes out, I'll make a big post like, hey, it's happening, Ron Paul GIF, whatever. And that's when I'll share the form.
So in ways that you're more interacted with the podcasts, a weekly basis, you actually make the music for us, and you're one of the artists' music that we use, and you make quite a bit of music yourself, don't you?
Yeah, I've been making music with my computer for about 3 years now.
And what made you start?
Well, when I was 11, I don't know how much of you guys get into the electronic music scene, but when I was like in 7th grade, the big hot new trend was dubstep.
I hate dubstep.
I was all about that shit when I was younger. And I, fancied myself a dubstep producer. I wanted to be the next Skrillex. So I got a shitty copy of FL Studio 9 and watched a couple tutorials. But being the kind of person who'd rather dick around with the program and learn by doing than watch instructional videos, I was quite shit for a long time.
Yeah,
and I thought it was great when I was like, oh man, this is the next hit, you guys. This is the next.
Download my mixtape. It's fire.
Oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. We didn't say that in 2011, but that sure was the sentiment. And I'm so thankful that I had so many friends who were like, yeah, it's great, man. Keep going, because they could have just been like, oh, dude, this is shit. But they were supportive. They were supportive. Yeah, please stop forever. But they were supportive, and I slowly but surely got better. I'm still not I'm not prime time yet. I'm not radio. I'm not signed. I'm not on a collective or whatever. I've still got a long way to go, but I might actually post my old dubstep account just for the shits and giggles. I might share that at some point. My cheesy dubstep name was Syntax Jet.
It's too bad we're a week after April Fool's almost. We could have used some of your shitty stuff just for fun.
Yeah.
Well,
hot new tracks from LWS. Oh yeah,
podcast intro with tritones all over the place.
That would have been funny.
And so I hear that you have a new album out actually today.
Yes. I'm in conjunction, specifically planned to be at the same time as the podcast. I will be releasing an album called Eternal Blue.
And where can people find this?
And they will be able to find this on bandcamp.com, where they can purchase it for $5. But it should also be able to be streamed on SoundCloud, and within the next week, streamable on YouTube.
Cool. I'll have links to all of that in the description.
Yeah. This has been the shamelessest, pluggiest episode we've done so far. But
it's good. So
it is.
I didn't approach him for the guest spot because of this. Okay, this just happened. Trust me, this was not. I didn't do it on purpose.
Right. But yeah, there'll be
tracks that you want people to check out. Anything?
Yeah, there'll be something like 7 tracks on there, and most of them will be pretty okay. I think the main one that I really like the most off of the album myself is the title track, Eternal Blue, because it doesn't really fit. Like, you know, a lot of EDM these days is very genre focused. You know, it's got to be this BPM and it's got to have this kind of sound, and that makes it dubstep. That makes it big room. That makes it trap. And that was my bread and butter for the longest time, as I was just following the genre rules. I'd be like, oh, I want to be like Martin Garrix. I'll make a big room song, and it's got to have a fat kick and go for 128 BPM. And I was just following the rules, but now I'm kind of trying to step away from being that guy.
I mean, yeah, the rules are like the place to start. I mean, I'm a music student, so I'm doing a lot of theory and everything. And I mean, we don't do like so much like strict BPMs or whatever, but it's very much like, here's all the harmonic rules and here's how they're applied. We've started recently doing forms, so that's a bit more like what you're talking about. But yeah, like it's basically like, here's the rules, so that later when you break the rules, you will understand why you're breaking the rules, so you can make good music.
I really want to get into music theory stuff. As far as all that stuff goes, the way I perceive myself, at least, I don't want to come off like I'm capable at all of objectively analyzing my own skill sets. But I think one of the things that I'm better at is the writing of it and coming up with the melody. And almost all of my songs, 90% of the time, have lyrics, and I just write the lyrics. I never get anyone to sing them because I have no idea how vocal mixing works. And that is something I'd like to get into. I'm actually talking to this one guy I met on Reddit who wants me to write lyrics for him and a singer to use in their songs officially. And that'll be cool. But where it comes to the production side of things and the actual making of the sounds and designing and using plugins and mixing and mastering and all that techno-babble bullshit, I'm not so good in that department, at least not as good as I am at writing the songs.
And so people can find that at soundcloud.com/shockatlas and lawsonme.bandcamp.com. And
it's Lawson Smead, S-M-E-A-D, just making sure you guys know how to spell it.
I missed that. I'm just reading the link. And also at youtube.com/channel/UCKZD1SEASLOC31RSA.
What link are you reading?
The youtube.com/.
Oh man, I feel like they're gonna have an easier time just Googling your name.
just check it.
Google
That's the
Shock
whole
Atlas.
reason I'm named Shock Atlas.
And don't click anything related to Bioshock.
This has been
Ignore Bioshock Atlas.
This has been a long guest segment.
Yes, longest we've had.
Good interview.
I'm gonna take that as a compliment.
This week in the news, we have the reveal of AC Chronicles China, India, and Russia, which is very exciting. If you haven't seen the trailer and the gameplay, check both of those out because they're super cool. Essentially, if you don't know from the season pass of Unity being announced a while back, AC Chronicles China, Russia, and India are three different parts of a 2.5D game. You can think of it similarly to a game from a couple years ago called Mark of the Ninja, which is a lovely little game. But it is essentially the Assassin's Creed format in 2D, and I'm really excited because it looks fantastic. And from the gameplay, which you should totally check out, it seems to play awesome as well. And most importantly, we totally called it.
Fine.
We totally called it. Go watch the video last week. We were right, and we're awesome.
Hey, watch the video, or we haven't talked about this on the podcast. We are officially on iTunes as well now.
Official bitches.
Hallelujah.
So whatever your preferred medium is, as long as it's YouTube or iTunes.
Or you can actually we're also on Podbean, and you can ask me anything about that and about what you want us to see us on, and I can get that going.
All right,
pretty easily.
Two
we're talking about
major
Chronicles.
corporate things.
Both things.
Or
Both.
yeah. Okay.
That's Chronicles.
Yeah.
Aries.
We called it.
You're saying. I'm sorry. Excuse me. So Chronicles, if you listened to the last episode, which you probably did, we totally called the fact that there would be more than one Chronicle, that it was going to have different characters.
I didn't expect them to be a cohesive, like within a year trilogy of episodes, though.
Yeah.
True.
I was
Although
kind
I
of
did
hoping-
say we might see more than one in a year, so we called that part 2 technically.
Yeah. I was thinking it would be more like, I mean, we were talking like you'd have it over several years. You'd have like one
One
for
per
like
year.
fun to have a setting.
Okay, fair. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know, this, because they're calling it episodes specifically, I guess I still have somewhat hope for that, just because the things that do episodes right now are, you know, Telltale games.
Yeah.
There's a nice episodic push, and the thing about episodes is that you have a season and then you have a season 2. So
Yeah.
It's interesting. I actually don't agree with that. I believe that this is probably going to be a one-off trilogy. Like I originally
this
believed
bad?
that before it was likely that we were going to get Connor 1 because that was going to be a very good way to round off his game, round off his story. But I didn't expect them to choose the other 2 comic guys. But
I don't think
that we're going
it's-
to get much more out of this trilogy. It's one game. It's AC
I think
Chronicles.
it's going to be like
I
with
disagree
three
with you, Aftermath.
Yeah,
I
I
disagree with
think
you. Here's the
so
thing.
far.
Although, I mean, there's a merit to that because of the thing they've done with similar like 2D games like Discovery, and I mean they've released games on other mediums, but they tend to be one-off things, one and done,
Yeah.
like different style
They're
games.
saying, especially since the way this story interacts, the way that all 3 are interacted and you get a reward and a conclusive ending after each of them, I think that this is going to be a self-enclosed, well, they're calling it AC Chronicles, and then each individual parts, China, India, and Russia. So I feel like it's going to be one game, and we can't, maybe we'll get similar games, but they won't be Chronicles.
See, yeah, I think whether or not we see a continuation specifically of the Chronicles concept and storyline, I do think that Ubisoft would be stupid if the game came really successful and people enjoyed the style and then they never revisited it. I think what is more than likely to happen, because obviously the reception of China so far has been very positive, and I haven't seen a single bit of negative coverage about Chronicles besides the usual, they're milking the franchise, whatever.
Yeah.
I tend to think that they'll explore that further, and what I think might be a cool idea is if in the future they had, the new big tentpole game, right? AC. We'll use Victory as an example here, although I don't think this will be the case. But maybe a side game would come at around the same time, or perhaps the next year, featuring the character in a more side-scrolling environment. And as you said already, it might be a really great opportunity to revisit characters that won't get AAA full-on titles like Connor. So we could see maybe a Connor Chronicles.
Chronicle.
Okay.
Yeah,
As
I
we were
agree
talking
with you
before,
almost
we can get
entirely.
a-
That's pretty much
we can get
exactly
an
what I was
article.
going to say, that they'd be dumb to, if, we know Ubisoft decently well, and I think we know that if Ubisoft finds something that works, they will run with it. And I suspect that Chronicles, from what we've seen, looks like it's going to work. The design looks very tight. The gameplay looks good. And the format seems to fit very well with the pillars of Assassin's Creed. And I feel like they've really hit a fantastic medium here with 2D, because it's on the UbiArt engine, so it's very simple to develop for.
It's actually not
and
on UbiArt.
they can do. It's
It's
not on
It's
UbiArt.
on Unreal.
Oh,
yeah.
I thought it was on UbiArt.
Yeah.
I said it was on UbiArt.
I thought it was too. You're not the only one.
Man.
I
Well,
knew
at least
both
they have
of
a
those.
format that they can
I
develop.
knew
for.
that, and I still thought it was on UbiArt, actually.
Damn it.
And of course-
I was watching the live stream that Gabe and Esco did, and their guest, I can't remember the name of, but they were playing Chronicles China, and it looks very good. Well, Gabe isn't the best at playing it. It looked very fun, and it looks like, because it
How
has
dare
the
you talk
different-
disrespect to Gabe?
I've
Yeah.
seen, what I've seen, I've tried to avoid kind of the gameplay videos, partially because, I want to, experience it in
Yeah,
full,
me
the
too.
first time myself. But what I have seen, I was, I wasn't sure how much they'd integrate 2.5D. I mean, the best 2.5D game I've played has been Little Big Planet, and the way that treats 2.5D is kind of ambiguous because it's 3 layers. But what I've seen, it looks really interesting, just the way you maneuver, and because it works in concert with the stealth, I think that's going to be really exciting.
Yeah, to
And
the point
I
of
would
Little Big
say,
Planet. Go ahead first. Yeah.
I just think it begs any conversation about Chronicles like this is obviously going to beg the question that's been on a lot of people's minds, which is, Does this rule out the possibility of China, India, and Russia coming back in AAA titles as major installments? And I was wondering what your guys' thoughts on that were.
I would say entirely yes, because the point is that they're not going to spend the resources to develop those games, so they're doing this instead so they can pacify the fans like us who would like to see that and are content to play their stories in a 2.5D environment. But Connor, sorry, McCracKenway, darn it, I keep doing this. To your point, with Little Big Planet,
I want to address your other point now.
Three slices of depth, but Chronicles, China, India, and Russia.
Well, not
are you move and you can rotate around the level a little bit. So it's a very different experience from Little Big Planet, and I think that's
why
most people
that's
don't realize.
like because when I thought 2.5D, Little Big Planet was the first thing in my head. As to the what Lawson was saying.
Before we move on to what Lawson said,
what?
You clearly haven't played Little Big Planet 3 because that is expanded from the 3 layers on
16.
Yes,
right?
Exactly. And they use them way more. You go back and forth real quick.
Really?
Super easy. Yeah. There's a zipline thing that goes around and around and around, and it can go between them, and it's much easier than the
such a fun
first
game.
And when I think of 2.5D, at least what sprung to mind first was Mortal Kombat and the Injustice game.
Ah,
I really enjoyed
I don't think of that as 2.5D, really.
The advertising is 2.5D. You interact with the backgrounds and things.
It's not the same 2.5D, but it is a form of 2.5D because it plays in a plane, but you can shift that plane.
2.5D.
I remember when 2.5D was just starting to become a thing back when I was really younger. It usually meant that it was a two-dimensional side-scrolling game with no other planes, but all of the models had three-dimensional models. Some of the first ones to do that, I remember Sonic Rush being a pioneer for the 2.5D, and I remember New Super Mario Brothers, the one that came out in 2006 for the DS. Those were the games that I always associated with 2.5D, but I think it's fitting that it's taken on a different meaning now. It's two-dimensional, but there are rotating planes, and you could, like Fez, would count as 2.5D, I guess, by that.
Oh, Fez.
Fez sprung to mind when I first saw the gameplay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How you
Fez, I don't think anything's going to be quite like Fez, though, which is a shame that the creator is slightly...
oh, God. Don't open the Phil Fish can of worms. Let's not do Phil Fish.
Now, I wish there was a Fez too, but there's not going to be.
No, okay, back to what Lawson was saying real quick.
Yes.
How we potentially won't get a AAA game set in those settings. I think I agree for the most part, because I definitely think that it means that we won't get a AAA game with these characters. That's the one thing that it certainly confirms to me. I don't think we're ever going to see Xiaojun as a protagonist in China.
I think
definitely not Nikolai.
Definitely not Nikolai.
Yeah, I think Nikolai's probably played out. I would say that I guess it depends. I mean, we've recently had the announcement there's like 10 years worth of material for them to work with continuing the franchise. I guess depending on how long the franchise goes on and how well characters and settings are received, I don't think it precludes them necessarily from showing up, but it's not going to be while there's like other ideas that they can snap up easily.
Which was majorly disappointing for me because anyone who follows what I say on the subreddit knows that my big 100% true theory was that after Victory we'd get a game in 1970 Russia.
That was the thing I wanted to call you out on.
I was saying that, that's what it was. I was saying that so often. I was like, dead set because I had that feeling like, oh, I predicted the last two or whatever. I was like, this has got to happen.
Incorrect, because we're getting that 3 games from now because it's Assassin's Creed Chronicles Russia.
Yeah,
right.
One thing that I think is interesting, as I was saying, that we won't get the same characters, but we could get similar settings in different time periods.
In different time periods, yeah. I'd be
example,
very
surprised.
Communist
China would work really well, and that would be completely different from ancient China. And same with like British Raj India.
I would go with Opium Wars China, but I have that prepared for some time when we do that.
I think Japan, if we're talking about Asian settings, which one will actually happen as a AAA game first, I think they'll go to Japan before they go to China, just because they've had Chronicles China already, and that Japan would probably scratch the same Asian itch, which sounds like a medical condition, but or a sex position. Yeah.
God. Stop right there.
Okay, I'm done. I'm done. But but yeah, I think Japan, feudal Japan would be more likely. Even though, yes, anytime I say feudal Japan, someone's gonna say, "But Ubisoft said they wouldn't do that," and I don't think that's true.
It's actually a common misconception that I actually myself believed for quite a while.
May?
It was Alex Hunderson and Ashraf Ismail, I believe, that both said they wouldn't want to see Japan. So if I believe that's what I've read. I believe maybe it's just one of either of them, but so we won't see it as long as they're creative directors on that.
That's the same thing with any game set during World War II, which I don't think is going to happen. But
I hope
that was a thing that specifically, like Corey May back when he was writing, said.
That's just
it's not going to. That could be a Chronicles game, but I don't think.
But that makes sense. That makes sense more than feudal Japan makes sense as something they won't go to. There are all kinds of reasons why World War II or really any modern time won't work, but there aren't as many reasons against feudal Japan.
I have an example of how World War II might work. There's a little known game that a lot of people
The Saboteur
called the Saboteur.
Yeah.
It's the game that like I've heard mentioned so many times that I've never played.
It's the mark of the ninja of World War II Assassin's Creed.
Yeah. That's some quality stuff. I really enjoyed that game as well.
Mark of the Ninja? I've heard only good things.
Saboteur.
Both of them.
Oh, you're talking
I've seen gameplay of Mark of the Ninja, but I played the Saboteur myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was a really interesting art style and the way that
it's black and white in the Nazi-controlled areas. And
like you clear the districts and it's black and white and all dreary and stuff in the Nazi districts, and then it gets all bright and colourful like you'd expect from France in the summer in the liberated areas.
Which
that might
just reminds me of the...
That might be a reason against the Chronicles game, just because the art style is already taken. They're pushing the fancy art styles.
I think that, like, what you guys are talking about, the Saboteur really reminds me of the Helix Rift mission where you go to the occupied Paris. Yeah. Is it similar to that in any way, Afty?
Yes, it's very similar. How that's. Yeah, there's a lot of black and white on that.
Because I loved that so much. And even though they totally ruined it in the Time Anomaly trailer, which was, dick move, Ubisoft.
I
dick
didn't
move.
watch it.
But
it was great
good
for you. Good
I
for
went
you.
into exile the day I saw the thumbnail for that trailer. I was like, damn it, now it's spoiled. All right, I'm off the internet for good.
Yeah,
and then,
I was so mad that they made a trailer of that, because the whole time that it was happening in the game, I was thinking, this would have been so incredible if they would have kept their mouths shut about
seriously.
it. Sorry to derail the conversation for that brief rant on Helix Rifts.
All right, just before we wrap up this conversation on Chronicles, what's very interesting, how they've told us that there's going to be a story that links all three together and gives us a conclusive ending if we've played all three. What a lot of people are theorizing could be the box links all three together.
I think that would make the most sense, just because
That's
we know
what I'm thinking.
had the box. And we don't really know how it got from Shaoyun to
Europe.
Adewale.
Well, it got from to Europe and Templar hands.
Yeah, well, we know how it gets Adewale got it, but we don't know how it got to Templar Europe.
He got it from,
and we don't really know where it. I mean, it's in. Bastien's got it, but we don't necessarily know how it gets from her to anybody else.
Well, we know that Shay ends up with it.
Yeah, we do know that.
He kills Charles Zorn.
So I guess the one thing about the box against the box is that we've had a game where it plays a major role already. So it feels like it's had its day, I guess. And
we've had two games with stages.
Yeah, if I can...
Yeah, but we also had 5 games with Apples of Eden.
Well, I just think if the box becomes... I have 2 concerns about the box thing being true. First of all, this is a major plot line that's been teased through years of material from Embers to Unity. So it would seem a little bit strange to relegate that revelation to a side game. Like, you'd think that if they'd want to keep that in the main franchise. And the other thing that concerns me is anything that gets hyped up for this long can inevitably disappoint. I'm really hoping that there's something in the box that is earth-shatteringly awesome and has ramifications that go across the whole Ubiverse. You know,
As far as we
The
know-
answer is bats. It's full of bats.
if it ends up not changing everything, it's going to be such a cock tease, and I'll be
Didn't
very
that get
upset.
explained in Rogue though?
Yeah, in Rogue,
Say again?
it's a map translator.
For the Vonage
It's
manuscript.
basically a little it's basically a little
That's
machine.
it.
Um,
That's what. Oh yeah. See, I forgot that was like the whole point of Rogue. Wow.
yeah. Crap.
And so yeah, it
Talk.
gives the locations for the trees of Eden.
Oh yeah,
Trees
the,
of-
That's
Ooh,
what they're called.
that's what
that?
those are called.
That's what
Oh.
he calls it a tree that's holding the roots that are holding up the world.
Oh, those are the
Oh, yeah.
things
And
that
so
make
the
everything
community
go
is taking
makes
toward
sense.
them, calling them the trees of Eden. And so
Like that.
They're an
actually,
interesting concept, if a bit like Uber, like sci-fi apocalypse feeling.
Oh, I liked it. I liked
I
the
think it was
idea
cool,
that there are these
but-
pieces of Eden that you know, there was something kind of awesomely dark about that whole plot line when Shay
Yeah.
grabs it and everything goes to shit.
I guess
I like that.
The payoff for those, I feel like since they talk about having this planned out first Civ history, is finding out why those were built in the first place. Jesus.
That could have been one of their attempts to stop the solar flare from destroying the world, because they said they had
That
6 attempts.
would-
Ooh,
Maybe
yeah.
it's just like
There we go.
wait, but she named all
recording
6 attempts. Is that one of them?
Oh, I don't know.
Get out of
Maybe
here
it
with
was-
your
maybe it was
logic
after-
aftermath.
They do
Christ.
rebuild afterwards in conjunction with humanity. So that might be it. Is like we build these things that are literally holding the Earth together, because otherwise it's going to drift apart. Because
Yeah.
But one
flares
thing I found
do
interesting
whatever they like.
was that they're holding the world together. Okay, but then he just breaks one occasionally, and then everything's okay.
Is there one
After the
under
earthquake.
every single city? That's what I want to know.
That map
Because
had
if
a
that
lot of
just
dots
caused
on
an
it.
earthquake for Lisbon, is there like a gigantic underground structure under like every single city in the world that could hold
Probably
it
not
together?
every
The
single
map
city.
only showed like 10 or 20.
Right, exactly. So you'd
that's a
think
lot,
that the
though.
earthquake would wreck a whole
That's
lot
too
more
many.
shit than just Lisbon.
Yeah,
Um,
and
before we get too far, we're already kind of far off it. But one thing,
Were we talking about Chronicles earlier?
yeah. What we have with Chronicles, the link, because the description for each kind of segment basically says like, this person's hunting after an artifact, this person's also hunting after an artifact, this person's hunting after an artifact. So that's kind of the thought with the link with the box. But
Yeah.
as well, although we've had comics covering it, we know that each of those assassins has an artifact in any case. Like Shagun does have the box, but then Arbazmir has the Kohinoor diamond, and Nikolai Orlov has a staff. Though, if I feel like that would be that would feel cop out to me, because it's like retelling the story, I guess.
Yeah, I highly doubt that we'll see the Kohinoor and the staff, because those are accounted for. There's no missing holes in those stories that we need to know anything else about. But yeah, just a very quick question, like literally 30 seconds to answer. Which one are you most excited for?
Oh yeah, India. Because before reading Brahmin about an hour ago, I knew nothing about Arbazmir or India or the stuff about that, and it's fascinating to me. Also, my girlfriend is a print major, so she does a lot of stuff with lithography, so I'm excited for that, because it's in lithography style.
Yeah, I like India's art style the most, so plot notwithstanding, I'm going to say India.
Okay.
well,
I think for me, Aftermath, what do you think?
I'm most excited for China, and then as soon as China's going to be released, I'm most excited for India, and as soon as India's released, I'm most excited for Russia. I'm most excited for whatever we've seen the most of, and so far we've seen the most of China.
I am most excited for Russia, predictably, because Russia is a hugely awesome setting to me, and I loved Nikolai so much in the comics. As much as I kind of wish they would have gone with Inokenti for the game, but yeah, that's whatever. I love Nikolai, I love the setting, and the propaganda art style is just ooh.
That's really cool. Yeah.
It gets me going. Oh.
All right, this week's character discussion is on a person that many people will know already. His name is George Washington. You may have heard of him. He is the first president of the United States. and he shows up in Assassin's Creed 3. Goes without saying, if you really don't want Assassin's Creed 3, which is a 3-year-old game by now, spoiled, stop listening now. But we're going to talk about George Washington, instrumental commander-in-chief during the War for Independence, instrumental in several important documents after that. All right.
Cool. No one's going to say anything. That's good.
Nope. The discussion's over.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it.
So one of the main things is Connor's interaction with him was what we see the most of him. Before we get to that, because I'm an idiot and forgot about this, he actually makes a quick little cameo appearance in Fort St. Matthew while we're playing as Hatham. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yes, so when you're playing as Hatham stalking, what's his name, Edward Braddock, he's talking to Washington. And then when you get out of the Animus, Sean's like, hey, there's your buddy Washington. He's chatting with the Templar. How do you feel about that?
Yeah.
Desmond's like, shut up, Sean.
And he's
Shut
also
up, Sean.
He's also in
Cameos.
Rogue, briefly.
Yeah, very briefly in Rogue.
There's Rogue,
But
right?
it's
George
really
Washington.
actually that beginning the beginning of Assassin's Creed 3 where you're playing as Hatham and you're in, to some extent, the 7 Years' War. That's actually where George Washington starts becoming an important person in any case. He has the debacle at Fort Duquesne, but actually he kind of traipses around the wilderness for a while longer with a small force. Ends up kind of by accident being one of the instigators of the 7 Years' War. He's literally like with this Indian chief, or exiled Indian chief, used to be like president of several Indian nations. That's not the right word, but basically he's with the Indian chief, and without really knowing it, or knowing what's going on, because he doesn't speak the language, Washington is sitting there while this Indian chief goes up to this British ambassador, like this British, early rank officer, and just kills this British ambassador, and that starts essentially the war.
Oops.
And the Indian chief is basically like, if I do this, then he's gonna be in on it because he's right here, and all his stuff are gonna help me. But yeah,
That's cool. And so we see him quite early on in AC3 for the first time. Where's the very first place we meet him? Is that
as
in that
Connor,
place that I've forgotten the name of, that camp of his?
Valley Forge,
That's
Fort
it.
Matthew.
No,
Yeah.
Valley Forge.
as Connor. Yeah, Valley Forge.
Right.
historically
Yeah.
happened.
Valley
And-
Forge.
Probably one of the most dramatic moments in the game is when we find out that he was the one who ended up burning
Yeah.
Connor's village, and it
Yeah.
wasn't Charles
That
Lee
was
all
so
along.
confusing to me because
That was a
Connor
plot twist.
went and he heard like Hatham was like, "Ah, yes, didn't you see? He was the bad guy the whole time." And then Connor's just like, "Yeah, okay."
Shut up, Dad.
Shut up, Dad. Where is Charles Lee?
I think
Like he didn't
That-
give a shit.
that
He
kind of
didn't
speaks.
care.
I think that kind of speaks to Connor's ideals more than anything. Actually,
And then like the next day he's fucking playing tetherball with Washington. They're jolly old mates now.
After
Yeah,
killing his
okay.
best friend.
After killing his best friend. What?
yeah,
I didn't
and,
get it.
Doing this thing at West Point briefly, kind of. That's like a small thing, but
Oh, yeah.
there's a little more interaction.
Here's the thing with that mission. I played that mission fairly early on in the game. I think I played it during like sequence 7 when I first got to New York. So
Yeah.
the cutscene,
no
Washington's
sense,
like, "Hey Connor,
right?
help me do this," and Connor's like, "After I do this, I'm not talking to you ever again." Washington, I'm like, "What the hell is
Pretty sure I
wrong
did the
with
same
Connor?"
thing.
Yeah.
I was like, "Someone's
funny.
angry today."
Yeah, like if you do the homestead missions after Achilles dies, and you see Achilles there, and you're just like, "Oh, hey, Achilles," and he's just like, "Sup, Connor?" But he's dead. How's it hanging, Connor?
What I was
Also,
going
yeah,
to
like-
mention was Washington's portrayal in relation to Connor. Lawson, you mentioned this during our little intermission between recording, but he's one of the more easily forgettable characters in the franchise because
Yes.
he really doesn't have a lot of defining character traits besides he's Washington. He's kind of a sort of bumbling general who makes himself president in the end. And besides that is like, okay, he's justice, he's noble, he's like generic good traits, but like his the way that I think of him is really in relation to and in contrast with Connor, because Connor is this guy who does all this hard work and gets all these things done, but in the end fails to achieve his goal of protecting his village. Washington does sod all almost the entire game, and he ends up with all of his goals fulfilled. The British are out, he's won the war, he's president, he's got a good life. So they're like a total contrast.
That's
Washington
a great
is useless
analysis.
and gets it right. Connor does everything and gets completely screwed in the end.
That's so good. That's like a really deep, clever analysis, man. That's awesome.
I know we're pretty far into the episode. We're pretty far in time. One thing I guess that I forgot that we should probably talk about because Washington is that he plays a major role in the DLC for AC3.
Yeah, I was going to mention that.
Yeah. King Washington. And the interesting thing about that for me is because this tyrannical king that he becomes in that is actually in stark contrast to the man he later becomes. We see that in the cutscene at the end, which I think is a great cutscene, actually, if you like the American Revolution. But as we go on, like in history, and I'm the history person here, especially when we get to the Constitutional Convention, he doesn't speak the entire Constitutional Convention because he doesn't want to influence the convention either way, because he knows that he's this big figure and he doesn't want to take this power. He just wants people who he knows have had more education than him, for one, to create this document that's going to be hugely controversial.
I found it was very interesting in that I think explains away the reason that he's so different in Tyranny King Washington to what he'll end up being is because he's being shown what the apple could do to him.
So he's like, I so don't want to do that, and he goes way in the other direction.
And like, I think in the loading screen it even has like, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Yeah. I do not want to get beat up by a guy with animal powers. That's not good.
Oh man,
I'm gonna
I
cross
played like
off
the
building
beginning.
a pyramid off the to-do list. Don't want anything to do with that.
My thoughts on George Washington as the character in AC3 is that I think it just really is, because the writers, when they're writing AC3, obviously there's more familiarity for most people with American history, and obviously this is a pretty America-centric viewpoint to have, but I think a lot of the problems people had with AC3 in general was because we know so much about American history, it feels less realistic to have Connor photobombing all of these American events.
Dumping his way through history.
Yeah, I think the Paul Revere Midnight Ride was literally the low point for the entire franchise.
Yeah,
to the left, Connor.
Actually, learning about Paul Revere after playing AC3, he's actually way better reality than he was in the game.
My personal viewpoint is that AC as a franchise has all of these great historical characters. We mentioned earlier in this podcast how awesome and fun Napoleon was to have around in Unity, right? And then, you also had the Borgias, which were all really memorable characters. Cesare is the best villain that the series has had ever, in my opinion.
Evil, but fun, yeah.
And, cartoonishly evil, but most memorable, and the easily best written antagonist. And like all of these great memorable historical characters, George Washington is just so forgettable compared to the rest of them.
Well, I think that wraps up the episode for this week. Thanks for joining us, Lawson.
Thank you for having me.
Special thanks to somebody that uses Radoon and Lawson for allowing us to use their music, which can be found in the description along with timestamps for everything we discussed. As usual, you can reach us on the Assassin's Creed subreddit, which is assassinscreed.reddit.com or reddit.com/r/Assassin's Creed, as well as on Twitter and through our email, animusislandpodcast@gmail.com. I'm very excited to announce that next week we'll be joined by Ubisoft Forums user Fatal Feet to discuss the podcast he hosts, the Assassin's Creed Community Podcast, and what life is like on the Ubisoft Forums. If you'd like to be a guest or would like to ask us a question to answer on the show, then you can contact us in any of the ways listed earlier or any of the ways listed in the description. Once again, thanks for joining us and have a good night.